Good morning and thank you for your attendance today. I declare open this public hearing of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Works into the proposed Department of Defence Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance Storage Program Tranche 2, which might be referred to as the GWEO. I begin by acknowledging the Darug Nation, whose land we meet on today. I also acknowledge the cultures of any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present. In accordance with the committee's resolution, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I also remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. I also ask all present to put their phones on silent, and also remind people if there are any questions on notice, we'd like the Secretariat to receive those before the 3rd of October. My name is Graham Perrott. I'm the Federal Member for Moreton in Brisbane, and I'll go down the table to ask people to introduce themselves.
I'm Senator Maria Kovacic, Senator for New South Wales.
Karen Andrews, Member for McPherson.
Keith Pitt, Federal Member for Hinkler and Deputy Chair.
Tony Zappia, Member for Macon from South Australia.
I now welcome representatives from the Department of Defence to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please each state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Air Commodore Ron Tilley. I'm the Director General, Capital Facilities and Infrastructure.
Good morning. Michael Walker, Director, Logistics, Explosive Ordnance.
Good morning. I'm Greg Chronopoulos, the Program Manager for Oricom Australasia.
Good morning. I'm Dean Burkett from Acor Consultants, the Design Services Consultant.
Good morning. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Davis. I'm the Project Director from Capital Facilities and Infrastructure.
Good morning. I'm Peter Spaven from Watt & Willard Consultants, Cost Planner.
Thanks, Mr Spaven. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt for Parliament. Air Commodore Tilley, would you care to make some brief introductory remarks before we proceed to questions?
Thank you, Chair. A priority of the 2024 National Defence Strategy is the Australian Defence Force's guided weapons and explosive ordnance capability, including the government's direction to build stocks, strengthen supply chains and manufacture munitions in Australia. The proposed works to be delivered by this project will increase the storage capacity for explosive ordnance at the Defence Establishment Orchard Hills to meet planned guided weapons and explosive ordnance acquisitions and strategic stockpiling requirements. The proposed works include an increased number of explosive ordnance storage facilities, additional non-explosive ordnance storage facilities, including a material handling and equipment building and dangerous goods stores, an upgrade of the high-voltage electrical supply infrastructure to support the power demand for the new facilities, and associated infrastructure and engineering services upgrades required to support the new facilities. The estimated total capital cost of the project is $244.9 million, which includes $22.3 million in contingency. The project will encourage local industry participation by providing local businesses with opportunities to supply construction materials and labour. The project will also actively promote opportunities for small and medium local enterprises through construction trade packages. There will also be opportunities for Indigenous businesses to be involved in the project in accordance with the government's Indigenous procurement policy. Expenditure on the project will support the Australian economy, particularly the construction sector in the surrounding region. Defence has undertaken extensive community consultation throughout the planning and development of the project, including federal, state and local members, the Chamber of Commerce, councillors, local Indigenous groups and members of the local community. Most recently, Defence convened community information sessions on the 3rd of July in the nearby suburb of Claremont Meadows. These sessions provided an opportunity for the local community to engage with the project team, ask questions and raise concerns regarding the project. A summary of these questions and responses has been included in the community consultation report, which is publicly available. Subject to parliamentary approval, the project is forecast to commence construction in late 2024 and is expected to be completed by late 2026. Chair, that concludes my opening statement. The defence witnesses are now ready to answer questions from the committee.
Thanks very much, Air Commodore. We might go to The Deputy Chair.
Thanks very much. And I'll come straight to the risk profile. Could you give us an indication of what the change in storage is on site in a percentage, if that's capable, up by 10, 20, 50%? And also in terms of the technical piece, the safety arc radii, if you could explain to that for the people who might be listening what that means and what if there is a change, whether it's increasing, decreasing, no change given the change in the storage of explosive ordnance.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chair. Before I pass to Mr Walker to provide further details, yes, there will be an increase in the storage of explosive ordnance. However, the buildings that we propose to build under this project, earth-covered buildings, provide safer storage than the current storage, the majority of the current storage on the base, which are essentially in light frangible buildings. Thank you, Mr Walker.
Thank you. And Deputy Chair, thank you for the question. Firstly, in terms of capacity, roughly this will provide about 45% more capacity to store weapons and other explosive ordnance on site, because we can store a range of ordnance from small arms through to weapons. It's not just restricted to that. So I think that was the first part of your question. As far as the safeguarding arcs, exactly as Air Commodore Tilley has just stolen my thunder, basically the earth-covered buildings do provide a greater level of protection. They actually provide the maximum level of protection to the contents that are inside a facility. So we don't always store explosives in earth-covered buildings. We can have light frangible buildings of various designs. So these particular facilities are being built here to accommodate the types of weapons that we need to maintain on site. And the safeguarding arcs that these will generate, given their design, will actually fall within the current boundary of the facilities. So
could you just explain for people who might be listening what a safety arc is? So it's just a boundary, and what's it mean?
And how did you come up with
how's it assessed?
What are the engineers that come up with them?
Okay. So there's a couple of things to unpick there. These are actually called safeguarding zones, and the safeguarding is actually about safeguarding the defence asset. So the safeguarding zones, as we looked at yesterday, so we have 3 levels. We have a green public traffic route, we have a yellow inhabited building distance, and then we have a purple zone, which is twice of that. So those are calculated based on the contents of the facilities, the types of facilities that they're in, whether they are traversed or have revetments. And that is...
Say that word again and explain what it is.
Revetments. So a traverse, a big earth mound which provides a level of protection. They are calculated. We use the NATO principles. So we have Defence Explosive Ordnance Regulations, which follow a whole list of guidelines that the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organisation publish, and we follow those.
It says this thing, when it blows up, goes this far, so you need this much earth or cement to stop it.
Yes, correct, sir. It's a bit more complicated than that. Different types of explosives. So we have...
I just want the public to understand what.
Okay, so the green line, I talked about that before. So the green line defines the minimum distance for any routes used by the general public. So that zone is contained purely within our Commonwealth property boundary for this. So you wouldn't have anybody transiting through that area. The yellow zone is the minimum distance for inhabited buildings, particularly general community residential housing, any other traffic routes. So you wouldn't have anything within that yellow zone for residential housing. The purple zone, which is twice the inhabited building distance, is the minimum distance that we have for what we would call vulnerable construction. And I think we talked about that, an extremely vulnerable construction. So facilities that are quite large contain a lot of glass or panels that may be impacted by, if there was a blast, from the overpressure and may dislodge glass. And that is probably...
So glass has no give.
That's right, and it was probably the falling of that glass that could hurt people is the major concern. So they're the basic parameters around that. Depending on the explosives, so we have different types of explosives. So explosives is a Class 1 dangerous good, but within that we have different hazard divisions. So hazard division 1.1 are extremely explosive items that would provide, if it was to be initiated, would cause a blast with lots of fragmentation. Down to what we would call hazard division 1.4, which is small arms, mainly propellant-based, or small, which would sizzle and pop. So there's no projection issue for those. So
if you've got a
depending on...
if you've got a 45% increase in storage capacity,
Yep.
but you said there's no change in the radii, so is that purely due to the design of the new facility?
Absolutely, yeah. As Air Commodore Tilly mentioned, the design of these facilities give you a reduced side and rear exposure zone, okay, based on what we have now. So I guess, to be really clear, and I'm not being very clear, the current zones for the whole base are based on the current buildings that are there.
Yep.
These new facilities, the arcs that they will project are within those already.
Okay, so it's actually smaller than the existing.
It will be smaller than what we already have on site. So that's when we say it's not changing the overall footprint.
Yep.
The safety arcs from these facilities are within the already footprint that's already there.
Really important.
And we can also build these new facilities closer together compared to the existing facilities.
Yep.
So there's a reduced chance of ignition or detonation of explosive ordnance stored in adjoining earth-covered buildings, which is what we refer to these as, because of the design of these buildings. So you can put a lot more quantity in a smaller space, which is one of the reasons why the safety arcs aren't being expanded out.
Okay, thanks.
Mr Zappy?
Thank you, Chair. My question goes to transportation of the explosive ordnances. Given that there's a 45% increase in storage capacity, I assume it's going to be taken up, which tells me that there's going to be more explosive material being transported in and out of the base. What impact does that have on the surrounding community in terms of their safety? Are any additional safety requirements on the transportation required, or will that not impact on transport?
Thank you, Mr Zappia. I will ask Mr Walker to provide a response to that question in regards to the transportation of what will be additional explosive ordnance coming to and leaving the base.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Mr Zappia. Yes, we are increasing the holdings on base. That is evident. And as I indicated previously, Defence applies the explosive transport regulations, so we have to comply with those. They are very strict regulations in how we move explosives around the countryside. That covers a range of things, from the types of vehicles we use, the drivers we use, the processes and procedures that we have to follow. So quite extensive regulations are already in place that we have to adhere to when we move explosive ordnance. For the particular weapons that we are storing there, yes, they will be more transported aside as we acquire them. With these particular weapon systems, and I'm not sure how much I should say in this public hearing.
I'm happy to take this in camera.
Oh no, look, I think it's important for the transport aspects, particularly for the items that we are bringing onto site. The majority of the movements there will be between the maintenance facilities as they go through their regular maintenance sites, and they will leave site only when they are needed for operational training purposes. So I think we heard yesterday we have monthly runs where we redistribute stock around the countryside, or if there's a direct activity that we need to support. But the majority of these movements for these weapons are as they go through their normal life. They need to have routine periodic maintenance, and that's why we place them close to the maintenance facilities. So we're not having to transport them a large distance just to come down and go through their maintenance cycle and go back into deep storage somewhere else. So that is the theory behind reducing the number of movements. So the particular weapons we have here will only leave when we're actually going to use them for operational training. So it's expected that there will be more stocks moving, but it's not going to be 50% more movements off the base.
And is the transportation carried out by Defence Department, or is it contracted out to private contractors?
Sorry, the actual movement? Yeah, that is most of the movements that we have are are contracted out to transport companies. Okay. But they are companies that are accredited to move that. So yeah, we don't just use anybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Zappia. Mrs Andrews?
Nothing for me.
Senator?
Good as well. Thank you.
Gee. Deputy Chair, you're good? We'll hold that to the in-camera one. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, I might just come back to a couple other things, if that's okay.
Please do.
So I wonder if you could talk through the bushfire risks and how that's managed. So you're going to have a 45% increase in storage capacity. You've obviously got these things in place now, but just in terms of public confidence, how do you manage bushfire risk?
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I will pass that question to Mr Walker to provide further information on the bushfire management on the site at Orchard Hills, and also going into the detail of the company that is contracted to undertake the management of the bushfire risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Not actually my area of expertise for the base, but I will address that as best I can. But firstly, I will start by saying, in relation to this project, particularly the earth-covered buildings that we do are actually extremely fire resistant. So that is the reason we are moving towards the new structures. They are more contemporary and give us greater security and safety features than what we currently have in the aged facilities that we do have now. As far as for the site, there is a bushfire management plan for the site. There are a number of strategies that are used to address bushfire and fire risk in general. Fuel hazard management obviously is the main one, and we're talking about fuel hazard management of actually grass and dry grass and other fauna and flora. At our site, we have contracted the Greater Sydney Land Services of Australia, who manage the environmental offset area in the buffer zones at Orchard Hills, and they perform regular cultural burns in that offset area. As well as that, inside the explosive storage area, we actually have regulations around how clear we have to keep the site. We do keep the grass at a very minimum height, 20 millimetres, to reduce the fire load in there.
Say that length again.
20 mil.
Inch. 3/4
inch. Millimetres. Sorry?
200 mil.
I was going to say 20, look longer than
200 mil, sorry.
200, yeah. Maximum 200, yeah.
Yeah.
But you also would have seen yesterday that there's local wildlife that assists us in keeping the grass down as well.
Yeah.
You got to bring in some goats. Yeah, Commodore, is that?
We've got the wallaroos.
Actually, we do use sheep and that at some sites.
I'm sure you do.
Given the terrain, it's very difficult at some sites to maintain the grass. So in the ESA, as I said, it is a cleared site. 200 millimetres for the record is what we keep the length of the grass. We do have regular exercise responses for the entire facility, and that includes bushfire response. I think what the key thing is, what was mentioned, is that the bushfire response that we have is provided by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and also Fire and Rescue New South Wales. We exercise with them regularly and have them on site. The real risk, I guess, at our site from defence out is in relation to the use of the range, and we've already heard from Wing Commander Wilkinson that we are very restricted in the amount of explosives that we are able to use on the range. It was only operated in very strict conditions, particularly around the environment and the fire hazard ratings of the day, so that obviously plays a lot. With the activities, we do above ground and below ground explosive items of very small natures. There are a lot of proactive controls by the people who are operating those demolition activities, and the staff that are there are trained well in both first response and emergency response. I will just to clarify a point that was made earlier, we will fight bushfires where we are possible. As I said, we deal with the local fire response services. Actually, if there is a fire in the vicinity of an explosive facility, we would only fight that from a distance. So we don't try and put people at risk in case an explosive facility was to actually initiate due to a fire.
So would that be,
aerial,
outside the secure?
So outside the yellow line, we would retreat and monitor that and try and treat that from the yellow line and try and contain that within there. So importantly, as I've mentioned, I hope, if there is a blast, we expect all the blast effects to be contained within the Commonwealth property boundary.
Okay, that's why those lines are there. And I think it was in the last hearing, but you mentioned that there has been occasion, sorry, I think it was someone else mentioned that fires have gone over such things before and not caused any damage apart from burning?
Yeah, there's a couple of instances, obviously in the bushfire season, and we do have sites that are quite remote. We did refer to one site. We had another site down near Eden when there was the bushfires there several years ago, and that's probably a really good example of how we maintain the site. So we had to evacuate because the actual bushfires were coming. We weren't able to get back. We had to have naval planes did an aerial reconnaissance to see what it was like. And the photos are available which will show the land is blackened and scarred all around, but the explosive depot, given that we kept the grass to 200 millimetres,
or less,
it was avoided. Literally the bushfire went around the site. We had a few little
and that was a super hot bushfire.
Yes, yeah, and it basically impacted us. So we do take bushfire management, and that particularly in the explosive storage areas, extremely seriously.
I'm going to assume that you've got access to aerial firefighting capacity, all those sorts of things.
Look, we do rely actually on the New South Wales Rural Fire and the Fire and Rescue. So whatever capability they have is what we rely on.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
All good. Oh, yes.
A follow-up question, just in light of that and the submissions that was made by Mr Wielden previously in relation to bushfire risk, and I might not be able to find the actual thing, but he was talking about, actually it is in his submission.
Page 5. Oh, no, sorry.
I'm just trying to look for look for the part where he said that if there was a bushfire, Defence actually wouldn't seek to deal with it effectively.
We would actually fight a bushfire. If there was a fire in the vicinity of an explosives building, we would retreat from that to a safe distance. So we would try and manage, the effects of that externally. But we would definitely fight bushfires if there is a...
So you would distinguish the two. What about if the bushfire got close to the storage areas?
Yeah, no, for safety of everyone involved, we would not try and fight that. No.
Okay.
We would provide
including from aerial?
Yeah. No, not. We would not put anyone at risk if there was a bushfire. Yeah, even the fire brigade. Yeah. If there's high explosives there, we wouldn't put anybody at risk. And as I said, all of our facilities are designed so that if in the worst case scenario that meant that we did lose a facility, the impacts of that should still be retained within the Commonwealth boundary.
And to highlight as well, like the explosive ordnance stores are actually rated at a BAL 40 rating, which is the highest rating that you can retain.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry, can you say that again? A 40 rating?
Yeah, so a BAL 40, so bushfire attack level.
Right.
40.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we saw a hut constructed by the Americans in about 1940, right on the edge of the forest, and it's still standing. So it's you obviously do fight bushfires in the area. So, all right, I think we're all good, committee. Thank you for your attendance here today. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript to make any corrections to the transcription, and I now declare this public hearing closed.